Tonight, we're going to shift gears and we're going to unpack what it means about using a portfolio strategy. So how do you think about being innovative and going after new paths for growth, but doing so in maybe a non-linear way, right? So how do you invest in a bunch of different areas and see some success? So with that, I want to quickly introduce now my favorite people. To my left is a woman named Audrey Hall. She is the Chief Product Officer of Brightwell and used to be a 352er, so miss you. She also helped co-found this event about 5 or 6 years ago, so it's pretty fun to have her up on stage with us tonight. To her left is a gentleman named Scott Sanchez. Scott formerly was the Chief Innovation Officer at Nationwide. He is currently the Product Innovation Officer at Deluxe. Please give them a warm welcome. So, Audrey, Scott, I would love for y'all to introduce what each of your organizations do and talk about why does innovation matter now and how is it important to your organization's future? So I'll start with Scott over there on the far side.
Sure. So Deluxe, if you've gotten checks written checks, half of those came from Deluxe, and they have since 1915, which is when we were founded. So Deluxe historically is known as the check company, though we like to think of ourselves as the original payments company. There are new payments companies coming out, let's be clear. We're on a journey as a company. We've been doing checks for 105 years, and we are transforming into a fintech or a payments and data company. And so innovation is all about how do we make that transformation? How do we actually reinvent ourselves from being more of a check manufacturer, which is how people see us, to actually a digital payments, digital provider, software provider of payments and data type solutions. And quite frankly, while innovation isn't new to the company, we're doubling down on it to really accelerate that transformation. And that's the role it plays. Like, it's instrumental to what we're going to become for the next 100 years.
Awesome. Audrey.
Yeah. So I work for a company called Brightwell. We are also a payments company, and we focus on digital payments, but our core business was largely focused in cruise ships. So many people don't think about this, but we pay cruise ship workers. They are from over 140 different countries around the world. And it's really interesting, but you wouldn't believe this, but people used to actually pay all of their workers in cash. And so they would have huge truckloads of cash delivered to each of the port locations. Imagine the security risk, obviously, involved with that, or getting it into crazy places like on Honduras, where there's just not as easy access. And so you're buying these armored cars to deliver that. Then you have a paymaster on board counting out the payloads for every single crew worker and then handing them a folder. And unfortunately with that, it didn't really enable them to do much with that money. And so they were kind of, I would say, handcuffed in a lot of ways. They couldn't get that money home. They weren't able to get off of ship. But anyways, more on that later. Ultimately, we had to innovate really when it came to COVID. COVID killed our business, as you can imagine. Cruising stopped, and we went from probably the best year of our history to the worst 2 years of our history. And so I'd like to say that we were choosing to be innovative, but I really think that we had to look at ourselves and say we were choosing to be, but I think it was really a means to stay alive in a lot of ways. And so we looked at ourselves and what are we best in class at? What do we have expertise in that no one else does? And what can we do and offer the market? And so we entered into a period of innovation and building, and we came out with 2 products that are now in the market that have already launched, and we've got clients on them, and they're growing exponentially. And so it's an exciting time, and we're already looking at our Horizon 3 opportunities. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So going back to the topic tonight, so we're talking about portfolio strategies. We've worked with tons of innovators over the years, some of whom have a very linear strategy, like, hey, if I just work on 1 or 2 things and I just keep it going, that's going to get me somewhere. We work with some folks who have pretty big goals, right? So, I mean, Scott, just as an example, like a goal I could just dream up is like 10 $500 million businesses over 10 years. It's a hypothetical goal. And so it's hard transformationally to build such an ambitious type of goal. And then, of course, have your stakeholders and executive team aligned to let's just say the path to get there. So I'd be curious if you could share a bit more about how do you guys think about a portfolio of innovation as a strategy, and then maybe how to use one. So let's start with the how.
Yeah, the why. Actually,
Right, the why. I meant to say why. No, I said how twice.
All right.
I meant the why. Thank
Robert,
you. Yeah.
Come on, you got up your game.
Get it.
You got a couple really.
I appreciate it, Scott.
All right, got it. No, so the why. It's interesting because one of the things I've learned about innovation over the years is you're not going to get it right every time. You're just not. And the sooner you admit that, the better off you're going to be. Like, you're going to get it wrong. The trick is, how do you maximize the chance that you're going to get some of them successful? And so the portfolio strategy for me is really a way to sort of think about, it's hedging your bets. It's realizing that you're not going to get them right. So how do you sort of put more lines in the water so that you get some right, even though others will fade away? But the other value, I think, of a portfolio strategy is it maximizes your learnings. And that's what I think about a lot, because I could think I'm going down that path, and if I learn something and I was going down this path too, if I learned something in both places, I might put those together and go a different path. And so for me, the portfolio strategy is all about multiple lines in the water and maximizing the learnings so we can figure out which of those directions we should go. You talked about Horizon 3. I love the Horizon strategy, and so we have innovations in Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, and we need a pipeline of innovations now and for years to come.
Yes.
Like, if I am too focused on the future, I'll never get there. If I'm too focused on the present, I'm going to wake up one day and I'm not going to have a future. Right? So how do we really think about it? So it's partly about hedging your bets. It's partly realizing you're not going to be successful every time you go. And it's trying to maximize the chance that some of these things are going to hit and going to help your company.
I want to come back to learning in a second, but Audrey, I'd love to hear your perspective on building a portfolio strategy as well.
Yeah, so for us, it's very similar to what Scott just said. I would say that we were trying to put out as many little things as we could into the market to see if there was interest in anything. And I think that was a real focus in building for MVP and really trying to see what the market wanted and what we could find product market fit in. And so that was really what we focused on. And it's kind of changed our culture in a lot of ways. Obviously, COVID was kind of the impetus for us to innovate. But then we started looking at all parts of our business that we struggle with and that we have pain points and that no one seems to solve. We tried to go buy one of the products that we built and we just couldn't find it. And so we were like, is this happening? We found a white space opportunity that easily. And so it's just, sometimes it's luck and it's just paying attention and seeing what's out there, and also just continuing that within your culture as well. Having other people understand what you're looking to do, understand your vision, and being able to raise a hand and speak up and say, I'm noticing something, or I have a pain here and I want to explore that. And so I think that's kind of a little bit of ours too. It's a little bit from the ground up as well.
So appreciate the perspective, and obviously you guys were under a lot of pressure, right? So you said it was the worst couple of years of the business. How did you, so it's one thing to use a portfolio mindset, it's one thing to build a lot of little MVPs. Can you talk about how you got people on board with that type of thinking when I'm sure there were lots of pressures for some sort of big grand slam home run? Meanwhile, that's not how this is going to work. I'm curious if you could speak to the management of other stakeholders.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. So we're PE owned, and so you have to actually start there. You have to build a mindset, even with our owners, that this is something that we need to invest in. This is something that we need to do. And so there's a lot of trust that's built there. There's a lot of conversation. There was a lot of research and diving into where are we going to spend our resources. And we also knew that we had to have some early successes and wins. And so we tried to really think about that. I would say that it was an interesting exploration with each of them. Our first one was just it made so much sense. We just understood the remittance industry and the cross-border industry so much that it just was such an easy in for us and something that we could really help others to enable for themselves. And then with our other one, it's kind of a crazy story. We woke up, it was April 8th, and $2.5 million was gone from our accounts. Our cards had been drained from a numeration attack. Obviously, we were able to recoup a lot of those funds, but it was a big eye-opening day. And so I speak about this because it was one of those moments where it was like, we looked in the market and we were like, who can help us? We had fraud tools galore. We had partners. We had a full transaction monitoring team on staff that were looking at them every hour, every minute of the day, and still it was missed. And so when that happened, it was also an immediate kind of response from our team of like, we need to solve for this. We need to find a solution. And obviously, with such a huge impact to the business, there was a lot more, I would say, stakeholder support than I think you normally get, because you need to mitigate that risk. You need to make sure that that can't possibly happen again. So that's kind of our strategy. But then again, we try to do a lot of learning and a lot of sessions with our different teams talking about why we're doing this. I think that there has to be a lot of emphasis on really embracing failure, right? I think we talk about this a lot, and Scott just mentioned that earlier too. It's just embracing the fact that you're not failing, you're learning, and that you're really getting something from that no matter what. And I know that that's a big part of 352 as well, and what you guys have there is part of your learning.
I appreciate it. Scott, I wanted to jump to learnings. It was a great segue by Audrey. How do you help people realize that learnings have ROI? Because I feel like that's a tough one for a lot of, frankly, just leaders, not even innovators.
Without a doubt. I would say to sort of merge learnings and stakeholders together a little bit, one of the philosophies we've got at Deluxe, and I've done it at multiple companies, is realizing that the stakeholders are not the customers, right? They're not. And they can have all the strong opinions in the world, but they don't know the customers. And so we took it upon our team to actually go understand the customers or prospects even better. Mm-hmm. And so what I think that results in is if we can have the information about what works, what doesn't work, then we can use that to bring our stakeholders along. And so I think a lot of organizations, a stakeholder or a leader has the idea, and come hell or high water, they're going to go after that idea. Great, let them go it, and they're going to fail, right? Most of the time. But I think what we're trying to think about is how do we actually learn what customers really want, even though they don't say they want it. And so I had this experience at First Data when I was there. Chief Product Officer came to me and was like, I want you to go build me a mobile wallet, right? I want you to go make this thing so that I can pay at every retail store. And he led with the words that just chill me as an innovator, which is, wouldn't it be cool if? Wouldn't it be cool if you could actually use your phone at every point of sale and it would go up to the cloud? So I took over this project. They'd already filed patents and everything. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so, but he was a stakeholder, he wasn't the user. So we started engaging with users, right? We went to talk to customers. We tried to understand what they really mattered. And it turns out, didn't plan to do show and tell, but it turns out that this thing that we have in our wallets and purses works really well. I'm sorry, like it just does. Now payments people, fair, will geek out and tell you, oh my God, there's so many problems and we've got to-
need the card.
Right, and we've got to, right. And we got to turn it into crypto, Bitcoin, all of that, which is fine. But what we learned is this. The idea was go build me a mobile wallet. We went out and actually did a bunch of research with customers. One of the use cases we looked at was quick service restaurants, right? If you've ever gone through the drive-thru in an SUV with a mom and 2 kids, it is the most miserable experience in the entire world. Right? You want to talk about friction?
Yeah.
I was amazed, and here we were thinking, oh my gosh, it's actually great, right? So we did this, and we would actually get in the cars with their permission, just to be clear, right? To try to understand what was the problem. It turns out the problem wasn't payment. The problem was waiting in line. So what if you actually solved the waiting in line problem, right? And I had to go back to my chief product officer and say, I think you're wrong. Right? All these patents, all the technology you've done, I'm not sure the big problem is mobile payment. What if the big problem is waiting in line? Long story short, this was 6 or 7 years ago. If you've used the Order Ahead app, right, and then you go there and it geofences you and you say, I'm in space number 5 or what, and they bring the food out, that came from my team, right? Because it was based on the insight of not waiting in line. And so in order to bring the stakeholder along, the chief product officer in this case, I had to not just tell him he was wrong, I had to show him. I had to take him out to the SUVs. I had to help him understand the customer and the learnings. And once he realized that his idea wasn't a great idea, and I gave him this other idea, he's like, ooh, what should we do? Let's do that. And I think that's part of it, is realizing stakeholders are not customers, and you've got to bring those learnings, not just to our team, but to all stakeholders throughout, so you can bring them on that journey.
I appreciate it. Before we take a couple of questions, and I want to allow for some both now and at the end, before we do that, I'm curious how you guys could talk about how risk profiles become a challenge to manage as you're trying to do innovation. In other words, every company has its own risk profile. Some have a high tolerance, some have a low, and then of course the people inside them have different ones. How do you manage that in lieu of I shouldn't say in lieu of, alongside of a portfolio strategy? Because it's one thing to use a technique, it's another one to manage almost the emotions and sort of the intangibles. For either of you, yeah.
So I would say the other dimension for me of a portfolio strategy is what are your big bets, what are your small bets, right? And so that's the way I think about managing risk to some degree. For example, at Deluxe, one of our big bets, we have a big business around receivables, right? So large enterprises, right, they get money in, right? And they need to make sure and apply that cash into the right places. It's a big business today. We're trying to reinvent it even more and leverage so much of what we've got. That for me is a big bet. And I think we could put the right resources on it and we could bring the stakeholders along. And so I knew that that was a priority for the company, so I could invest the right things in that. There are a bunch of little bets too. And I think the little bets is where it gets even interesting. We do a lot of learnings before we launch a single product, right? Rapid prototyping, design thinking, we could talk all day about that. But that allows me to mitigate some risk because that allows me to not spend as much energy. It allows me to learn. I don't have an executive saying, where are we on this, right? And it allows us to maximize the learnings. And so big bets, small bets help me mitigate the risk. Not all the big bets are going to work, not all the small bets are going to work, but it allows me to have a language so that I can meet the needs of the stakeholder, but still maximize the learnings along the way.
Yeah, for us, again, it's just slightly different, but we also make multiple bets, and we had a big bet. Our big bet was, can we get all of these big remitters to sign up to be part of one of our products? So one of our products is called Ready Remit, and essentially what it does is it enables other fintech startups or businesses to integrate remittances or corporate disbursements into their tool set as it exists. We have SDKs, APIs. We essentially were just like, it is so painful to integrate with remitters out there. It is so challenging to launch a program like this that we can solve that, right? And that was a huge risk because you have to get sponsor banks on board, you have to get remitters on board, they have to be comfortable working kind of together when it comes to sales. And so it was a really big bet for us. And then the other one was a much easier sell to our board and everyone else because it protected our business and it mitigated our risk of losses. And so we realized we could sell it out in the marketplace, but it was also an amazing bet for us because at the end of the day, it was serving our business and it was protecting our users and making the business safer. So I think that for us, we're still kind of evolving our strategy around risk and what we're willing to do. You laughed and said crypto, but yes. Because really we see that as disruption to the cross-border industry. And I think it would be a mistake to not pay attention to those things. But I also think when you're working with lots of different people from different backgrounds and understanding of kind of new technology that's coming out, they're a little more uncomfortable when you say crypto. And they're like, I'm putting it mildly. This is being recorded, remember?
Got it.
I'm just trying to make sure. I have a job tomorrow. No, but really, you have to make sure that you help to sell the business case to them and you tell them where the value is. And then there's lots of little check-ins that we do along the way. But I think that, again, our team has kind of a track record of success and being able to kind of see where those opportunities are and shift. And so we have a lot of leeway, I think, that maybe other corporations don't.
I think the other part of that, just to build on that, is I think the other thing is the process of innovation is about de-risking, right? And so I think actually asking the questions, whether you call it rapid prototyping or building, a business model canvas or whatnot, these things you're doing to try to maximize the chance that it's going to be successful. And so I think de-risking is inherently part of the process. And so part of it is the portfolio strategy, part of it is how you do the work, right, to try to figure that out, because what you're trying to do is maximize the chance that some of these products are going to hit well in market as product market fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I want to open it up to the audience for just a second. I'll take maybe one or two questions, not about crypto. We want Audrey to have no. We cannot talk about crypto. We can't do that. But maybe it's about risk. Maybe it's about portfolio management. John Avery in the back there.
It's also been my experience. You mentioned that the highest senior executive with the idea tends to be the one that gets worked on. And a portfolio implies a wide range of things being worked on at the same time. I wonder if you have any thoughts about a framework for sourcing and prioritizing ideas that maybe has a little more credibility than just one guy saying this is cool.
Wouldn't it be cool if, right?
Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple things there in terms of a framework for prioritization. One of the things we try to do in a portfolio is we sort of have two axes we look at. One is horizon 1, 2, and 3, right? When are they going to hit? right? The other is core, adjacent, transformational, right? Core, existing customers, existing business. Adjacent, existing customers, new businesses. You get the idea. Core, adjacent, transformational. And we're trying to have a good spread across. And so whenever I get a wouldn't it be cool if, what I'm trying to figure out is where might it fit in this? What's my best guess right now? And if I'm overweighted in Horizon 3 and it's another Horizon 3, I might say, hey, which of the Horizon 3s are more important, right? And make that person choose along the way. So I'm trying to balance it because again, one of the metrics you see out there is 70-20-10, 70% innovation on the core business, 20% on adjacent, 10% on transformational. You've got to figure out what the right balance is for your organization and then learn along the way. But the other thing I would say is there's a mental model out there on innovation that I've got all these ideas, I just got to pick the right idea. I actually don't believe that. I actually think the value of innovation is iterating the ideas in different ways. So in some sense, I'd care less about where you start as long as you're learning along the way and changing the ideas. Sometimes you might take this idea and put those together based on what you learned. And so I fight a lot of times when I get into organizations and they're like, oh, we need an idea capture tool system. Don't get me wrong, I love those things. It's just they're not great at driving innovation. They're great at engagement and employees and whatnot. And so I get, when I hear the word, oh, we got to just get more ideas or we got to pick the right ideas, I'll be honest with you, I am not smart enough, quite frankly, to pick the right idea. I have to work hard to massage and iterate the right idea, and allowing that process to happen, I think, is actually important in the organization.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Cortland.
Do you distinguish who works on H1, H2, H3? Is it the long-haired freaky people on H1? Is it current business on H1, or is it that?
Yeah. How do you guys do that?
I think for us, it is, it's not the long-haired people. It is the people who I think are willing to kind of embrace new thinking and different ideas. I think, there's the whole mindset of like, what are people doing in their free time? What are they playing with? And not to go back into crypto, but like crypto and NFTs, like what are people doing in their free time that's interesting, right? There's definitely people at our organization that lean more towards that and are embracing that kind of thinking and who want to be kind of on top of the trends and stuff that's coming out, who I think are just throwing out wild ideas. And then there's people who are closer to the core of the business and they can see opportunities for us to evolve that and to really think about how do those new ideas kind of bring new life into what we have as our offering so that someone else doesn't come in and disrupt us at some point and we fall behind ultimately in what our offering is. And so for us, I think it is, it's a spread, but we try to find thinkers that fit in both areas and really come to the table with that. But then we also make a habit of healthy behaviors, of talking about these ideas together, working together on them, workshopping, all of the things that you mentioned earlier that help you to find the right idea and really get those learnings out. But no, they're not the long-haired people.
It's funny, I was thinking about the question a little bit. I actually put the same teams on, I don't care. Because we believe that we need a diverse team, whether you're working on H1, H2, or H3. So what I think is key is you have people who are very more customer focused, you have people who are business focused, you have people who are technology focused, whether you're working on H1, H2, or H3 ideas. The one difference from a people perspective is that in Horizon 1 or more core ideas, we need more participation from the business, from the owners of the products today, where in Horizon 3 transformational, we need a little less. So that would be sort of the only difference, but I need that group of people who can navigate this, whether it's closer in or farther out. It just depends how big of a role the current business or current product plays in it. That's the big lever we use.
So I want to make this even more complicated. Audrey, you mentioned.
Supposed to simplify.
No, we're not starting with simple. We're going to go complex. Audrey, you mentioned it. You were talking about, I don't know, should we buy a company, right, or buy a solution? So in some of your portfolio strategy, build by partner comes up a lot. And I'll just say with the enterprise organizations I've worked with, and they shall remain nameless, UPS, they love to build a lot of stuff. They're getting better at buying and partnering, to be fair, but there's a lot of love for build, right? And I think some of it comes from what's known, what's accessible. I'd be curious how both of you had conversations, either your current roles or past roles, around how to make those choices, because it complicates matters more, right? It diversifies the portfolio and how and who you're working with, not just, hey, we're just going to do it all ourselves.
Yeah.
Sure. So what I have told my teams to do is a third of the time we're going to build, a third of the time we're going to partner, a third of the time we're going to buy. I don't know if that's the right number, but the idea is we got to be good at all three, and it's going to be really dependent on the situation, right? And so I think what we've tried to do at Deluxe is create a framework, if you will, for being honest with ourselves. Like, what are we really good at? Because if you're going to do build, what you've got to really think about is, are you good at it? Can you do it? And do you create durable advantage by owning it?
How does that self-reflection go in that exercise you use? I feel like people aren't good at that.
I hold up the mirror and it's not very good.
Okay.
It's hard because you've got to be honest with yourself.
Right.
But I think that's one of the things I think innovation has to do really well is not pick a side.
Yeah.
Not pick a side of is it built by a partner, not pick a side of if it's H1 or H3. Like, we got to work on it all. And so I think it's being honest with ourselves about what's real. I think it's about a little framework for if this, do that, right? Just as a starting point. The key for us is just making sure we have the conversation, right? And it's an objective conversation, because remember, we spend so much time trying to understand the customer. We know what matters, right? And then we're figuring out what's the best way to solve their problem.
Yep.
Not the best solution we could create, but the best way to solve their problem. And so in some sense, it takes it away from our lens of us, and it takes it to the customer and what's best for them. And sometimes we need to move faster, so we'll partner. So about a year ago, we spent about $1 billion on a merchant services company, right? So accepting credit card for small businesses, a company called First American. And could we have bought it? Could we have built it? Sure, we have capability where we were good at moving money. But at the end of the day, they were both a quicker and a better way to get there, and we can take that asset and build on top of it. So that was a buy. But we're doing partner and build, and so I think we've got to be equally good at all three and let the situation dictate.
Yeah, we've done all three, and I think what's interesting about us is once we've come to kind of an agreement, this is an area we want to go in, we've done enough learnings and research to kind of identify it, we actually kind of look at buying first and kind of like kick the tires on that, because I think that it just helps with speed to market. It helps with, obviously this is a capability someone else has done and someone else has kind of gotten there first. Can we just accelerate that? Can we make it better? In other cases, we partner for the same reasons because they can just do it better. And we just have to be honest with ourselves. And it's like, yes, we need this as a capability, or yes, we need this as an offering. And so we just need to find the right partner to be able to do that, because it would take too much time for us to build that in-house. And then we build ourselves when we know we're the experts and we know that we can offer something that no one else can. But it is that self-reflection moment where you look at yourself and you're like, but are we really? Or do we just like to say that? And I think that that's really where it comes down to, can you really execute?
So I love hearing about successful strategies. Tell me about some shit that hasn't worked. Tell me about either strategies or conversations you've had. You're like, wow, we really needed to approach it a different way, and I'm willing to share with a group of people at 6 o'clock in the evening.
That's all you first.
Yeah, she kept. I don't know if y'all noticed. She kept like, "Oh, you go first.
I know.
You go first."
There was a little bit of battle there.
Oh man, I even looked at my director over there and I was like, "Ooh, do I tell this story?" COVID was a rough time, y'all. I think we looked at ourselves at one point and we were like, we have no revenue coming in the door and we need to keep people employed. We need to keep this business together. And I'm not even kidding you. There was a 10 p.m. call where we're like, what could we do? Cut grass? Could we go around and cut? Could we like, I don't know, take care of people's yards? Because now they're looking at their yards more. It's not even payments. But we were just like so
Money's
open.
Green. Lawns are green. It's a great idea.
We were so open to everything. And I think we also built some new features into our product that I think our users didn't even really want, but we were like, this could drive more revenue. And there's one in particular, it's called mobile top-ups. Our users definitely use mobile top-ups, but they weren't asking us for it, and we didn't listen to them. And that is, I think, the most key component, is we didn't really have a need. We had a partner who wanted to do it with us. We knew that it would increase our revenue, and so we did it. We were like, yeah, anything. Let's just build it. And that was a a dark time. No, we do. It's still in the product. It's there. No one really pays much attention to it. I think we've got 100 users a month transacting. Yeah, it's still something. But sometimes I think there's different factors at play that push you to make decisions that you wouldn't normally make. And I think that is the biggest one for us. When we really took a step back and reflected and really took a page from the Innovator's Guidebook, I'll say, and really thought about it, we knew that wasn't the right move for us. And we really started doubling down instead and investing in the 2 other products that we built. And I think that was a really big moment for us, and we started to see that success from that. So.
It's awesome. For failures, do you want me to go alphabetically? I can do one for yeah. No, I'll give you one. At Deluxe, Deluxe is a fascinating portfolio company. We have some big products. We talked about check. We talked about receivables. Talked about merchant services. We also have payroll. We also have payables for large companies. So we have a smorgasbord of products, which on the one hand is awesome, right? We have some products for small businesses, some for big businesses, some for banks, some for consumers. So on the surface, having a large portfolio feels really good.
It does.
The challenge is when you're like, ooh, let's put them all together for a given customer, right? And so I think, for me, one of the things I got when I got to Deluxe, I was excited to think about what if we could put a merchant services together with a payroll for a small business, with a marketing tool that helps them get their next customer, with a starter kit for their check. Wouldn't it be cool if, right? And I said that, right? And I thought that, and I remember thinking that to myself, and man, how many times have I learned that lesson? And the reality is, we put this all together. Now, the good news is, we put it together on paper. No code was written, right? But it was the CEO's idea that wouldn't it be cool if, and again, I bought in. And then the good news is, we tested it. And it failed miserably. Because by the way, the other business we have is what we call promotions. So we actually put logos on mugs, right, as well, and T-shirts and things like that. So I'm telling you, we're a diversified business.
Yeah.
And we got everything from why the heck would I want a mug from the same company that does my accept credit cards?
Yeah.
And so I think, the learning there, and again, I keep learning it, other than the wouldn't it be cool if, I keep learning you can have the best idea in the world that you think. But if it's not really a best idea for a customer, right, it's not going to work. And so we killed it pretty quickly. And then we went more targeted. And we were like, well, what would make sense to go together? So maybe we're not trying to be everything, but what if we could put merchant with an invoice provider with this and with that? And does that bundle of things work? And so I think this idea, our belief was Deluxe is a really strong brand, which it is, but there are only limits to what it can do. And so I think the learning in that for me is just what can you really do? Who is the holder of your brand? It's not you, it's the customer, right? And what they think matters. And that I think is just a really important thing for us to keep doing. That was fun to go to the CEO and the ELT and say, I know you guys want to do this, but just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. And we had the data to back it up, and we hadn't done a single line of code, which allowed us to fail faster, which is one of the reasons we try to do that low fidelity stuff early, as opposed to actually spend time and resources building it.
These are delightful failures. Thank you for sharing them. Let's get some questions from the audience. Any questions on failures or techniques you'd like to understand more about? Kevin Lewis.
So it's about crypto. No, really.
Pipe down over there.
We're not supposed to go there.
No, really. I want to go back to the point of prioritization, because portfolio is one thing, as Scott said. It's another thing to be able to prioritize where you place your bets and how you place your bets. How do you approach priority? You've got stakeholders coming in all the time. Wouldn't it be cool if, hey, this is a great idea. Hey, this partner is presenting us with an opportunistic idea. How do you prioritize?
It's the same thing that Scott said earlier. We kind of tried to do a certain number of projects in each horizon and really started to build across the core and then thinking about what's next. And then, but it comes back down to trying to build the business case at the end of the day, trying to find if there's someone who's willing to buy buy it, and then that kind of helps us to understand where does it fall in our priority. We try to remove our own biases often because they definitely can lead us down the wrong path, and it has led us down the wrong path, and it goes back to you're not your customer, you don't know necessarily. In some cases, we were the customer at one point, and so we thought we knew everything, and we realized the market had shifted. And so now we're really interested in thinking through, well, how can someone else come in and disrupt us and think about something that we're not planning for? And so we try to keep a healthy number over there while still supporting the business with the core.
I would just add on prioritization, we could talk all day long about frameworks and desirability, feasibility, viability, like all of those. I would say the two things I've learned is one, it's really hard not to prioritize a senior executive's idea. It just is. I would love to. But the thing that I've seen that can overcome that is if you get more proactive in where to go look for the ideas. I call them territories. What are the territories in which we're going to innovate? We're going to go here, we're not going to go here. And that way, when you get those reactive, hey, a startup's coming in, or hey, go talk to them, or whatnot, I can say, wait, we agreed to these territories. This one doesn't fit in the territory. Do you want me to do this as an exception, right? Or is this an area that we want to change our territories? And what that allows me to do is to reground them on where we're looking. And so that's getting a little more proactive instead of reactive. And it's trying to put it back on them to say, how would you change the prioritization work we're already doing? And then it becomes less of a, let me evaluate this one idea by itself, and more about, oh, great. How does this fit in the larger scheme of things? No, I'd rather do that. Never mind, I'll say no. It's hard though. I will say it continues to be a challenge because you have people above you who have strong ideas.
I love putting it back on them though. That's
the boomerang.
Is it Matt?
It's the boomerang.
Yeah, Matt in the back, and then John, and then Dale.
So related to the comments of getting into the customer domain and then failing techniques, we want to understand what is your perspective on new ways to engage customers. What's the future of your sales practice?
Yeah. How do you engage customers and whatnot? So there are lots of ways out there, and technology is making that even easier, as you all know. I would say one obvious, one less obvious. The obvious one is the data that we're getting out of our products is getting better and better. How much time are they spending in this feature? How much time are they doing that? So I call it the product instrumentation. That is huge because that gives you a reality of where they're spending their time. The less obvious, though, for me who's been in human-centered design for a while, it's not. We go sit down with them and spend an hour and a half talking to them, right? One-on-one, not focus groups, one-on-one. We'll listen to them. We'll ask them, what did you do before this? What did you do after this? We'll put rough ideas in front of them. And I've learned that is the best way to learn as fast and as big as you can. Because what it does when you sort of have that empathy conversation with them or these prototypes is they can tell you things they couldn't have told you otherwise, right? It's the whole idea if you ask someone what they want, they can't tell you. But if you show them something that's even hand-drawn on paper, they can better react to a world that includes that, even though that isn't in the world yet, if that makes sense. And so it's obvious to a lot of human-centered design people, but those are the learnings that I still think are tried and true for us to unlock the innovation that they can't obviously say, I want X.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You want to? Yeah.
I would just add to the same thing. Yeah, we go in person oftentimes and we'll test things out and we'll watch and observe them with our products. And then the other thing that we do a lot is we'll sell things we haven't built, and we'll see if we can and see if we can sell them. There are products that we sell that we haven't built yet, and it's just to see if, well, how would we engage in a conversation? What are the big questions they ask us if they think that this is real at this point? And we have to have salespeople that are capable of handling those conversations and navigating that and being able to probe in the right places. But we'll also sometimes have product people on there, innovation people on it, to hear and listen and just garner those insights. And then we'll go back and we'll be like, oh, this is really what we need to do. We need to shift this.
Let's go that way.
Bit. Yeah.
So how would you compare the modality of evaluating things in a startup versus an enterprise? I'm going to throw something out. I like to use the principle of the first 10 and the first 100. You get the first 10 that'll go, this is it for me, I like it. And how you get to the next 100, and is it really different or is it really the same? That's the question.
I don't know if I caught the full question. Can you repeat that? The first, what is the difference to get to the first 10? Yeah.
So you're in an enterprise, bigger company,
Mhm.
or you're in a startup. And obviously, you and Scott are in
Yeah.
different spectrums there.
Yep.
But if the principles still apply the same, but I get those first 10 that say, that works for me, I really like it. And is the next gradient, the next 100, and finding those 100 that you have exactly similar, or then start to split your domains, as you know. Well, it's kind of over here for me, so it's really 50, it's not 100, but you understand the problem. So just talk through that a little bit from your experience and where you think that means.
You may jump in first?
Yeah, go for it.
So, funnily enough, I think of first 40, first 400, first 4,000. Okay. So, similar, exactly the same. 40 helps you understand what problem to solve and roughly how to solve it, right? I think, and it can give you a good conceptual direction for where you're going. I think the first 400 for me is about, are you solving it well, right? And so you build it, right? If the first 40-ish, right? The first 400 then is about, are you solving it well? Like, is it doing what we said it was going to do? And I think that's key, because then you're testing again. We thought it would be this. Is it really? Where I think the big jump, and I think those are similar methodologies, where I think the big jump is in the first 4,000, again, depending on your organization, the numbers might be different, is all about, can you get them? Can you get them and will they buy? And so I think this is where I often use a lot of the same methodologies around prototyping. We have to prototype marketing strategies. We have to prototype marketing collateral. We have to prototype marketing ways. We have to try using some of the channels we're really good at, and then try using channels we're not, and learn from that. So I'm still focused on learning, but my learning pivots from, do I have the right product, to can I get the right product out as I think about that. Is that sort of where you were?
Right, yeah, that's the awareness breakthrough.
Yeah, you have to.
Without the awareness,
You got to cross that chasm, to use that word, right? It's the same thing. It's hard.
many things fail on the awareness.
That's right. Well, and
organizations think they should get it.
that's right.
The
And
customers we have now should get it.
That's right.
They don't have to-
well, and that's where, if I could do a 352 plug-in here for a second. I mean, and I mean this seriously. That's why twice for the last two companies I partnered with 352, because they will help me figure it out. They will help me build it. And through their growth marketing work, they will help me get it to those customers. Those are the three pieces I need. Whether you use 352, whether you don't, you got to get it. If you build the best product in the world, but you can't get it in customers' hands at scale, it's just as bad as a bad product.
Same thing.
But you should use us.
But you should use, yes. Thank you.
Any thank you, Scott. Any bills, Audrey?
No, I agree.
All right, right on. John, we had a question for you. We have time for one other question after this.
Okay, in relation to funding, I know that large enterprises, a lot of times the innovation teams are funded out of the business units directly. The teams are actually in the business units. In some cases, they're in corporate. In some cases, they have both, and they interfere. In my case, the system I was in was funded out of engineering. In some cases, it comes out of corporate. Do you have any recommendations there about where you think it works best?
Yeah, I would say, sorry.
No,
you
go
want me
for
to
it.
jump
No,
in? All
you
right.
got it.
This is where the large enterprises is fascinating.
different.
Can we say fascinating? So I would say this. What I've learned the most from an innovation funding structure perspective is this. I think of it this way. There are three ways to do innovation with a company. You can do it to them, for them, or with them, right? And so the for them is you create this really interesting Skunkworks Innovation Lab secret thing in Silicon Valley. You come up with cool stuff and you're like, ta-da! And they're like, you can't do that for this, this, and this, right? And you end up with organ rejection, right? The other thing is you try to do it to them, and it's funded in the business units, and you try to teach them methodologies and whatnot, and you end up with what I call malpractice, right? Because they try to apply it and it just doesn't work. So for me, the dual model of innovation where you have a central team that's working with the business unit in partnership, that's where I think the magic is, and I call that with. So I have a small scrap, the last number of companies, I have a small team, right, that's really good at this. We will put resources into a project, and the business unit will put resources into a project, and we will lead them through the exercise, right, along the way. And so it's sort of a dual model where we're funding it in both places to some degree, but it allows me to stay more connected with them, and it allows me to not end up in organ rejection or malpractice often, if that makes sense. It's just hard, right? Because if you leave innovation up to the business units, they're not going to get there. If you put innovation only in the innovation team, you're not going to get there. It's about how do you leverage the best of both. So that dual model for me is sort of a good model to use. Not that it's easy, but it's a challenge.
We're much smaller. So
You are
the
innovation
core
engine,
business, that funds everything that we do, and we do split it though. I will say we have people from the core business come over and start working on it. We hire a few people in a really smart way when we're doing it and kind of put them together, and then eventually when it becomes strong enough to break off on its own, it gets its own kind of funding line. So.
All right, one more question. Anyone have a question? Maybe not. All right, I've got my last question. How about this? If you were to reflect back to a young Audrey and a young Scott, and they're like, I want to be an innovator, I want to be a product leader, what advice would you give yourself that you know now that you wish you knew then?
Oh man.
I know, right?
It's never as easy as you think it's going to be. No, I think it's, for me personally, it's a lot of work around communication and knowledge building across the whole company. I think that you can be someone in the room who believes in what you're doing and believes in trying to make change and move the company forward, but if you don't get all the other people around you behind that, and I'll tell you, there's definitely different levels of acceptance of this. They believe it now that we're on the other side of it, but I think when we even started some of this, it's like, how can you put us in this position where you're spending so much of our money and our people and our funds to do this? It's like risky, and I think you have to really build trust and relationships and approach each person differently and be willing to kind of adapt your own process around that, and so that would be something I would tell myself.
That's great. Mine's similar in that it's about the people.
Yeah.
Right? And Deluxe, we have a saying called everyone innovates, which means that innovation can't just be in my team. If it's just in my team, we fail. And so how do we build skills in everyone? And so, everyone innovates to me it's about the people, whether it's the customers or it's the people who are doing the work. Said another way, it's not about the innovations. I'd go back and tell myself, focus more on the innovators. You get more scale that way. If you build your own skills, if you build other people's scales, they will get you to unexpected places. And that for me is where the innovation is. So I would say invest even more in the people side of this and the innovator side of this to actually have more innovations.
I think I remember a proverb about teaching people to fish.
There you
I
go.
feel like that might
That's
have been
exactly right. Teaching people to fish. I think that's right.
Ending on a biblical quote. I love it. All right. Thank you guys for the time. Please give them a big round of applause. This is awesome.